In a small town where dreams went to die and conformity was king, a girl named after a bird of prey was about to prove that sometimes the most unlikely person carries the fiercest spirit. They said her name was too bold, too different, too much for someone who looked so ordinary. Little did they know that beneath that quiet exterior lived something wild and untamed, waiting for the perfect moment to soar. This is the story of how Falcon turned every laugh, every whisper, and every doubt into fuel for a journey that would leave everyone who underestimated her speechless. Falcon Rodriguez sat in the back corner of Jefferson High's cafeteria, picking at her peanut butter sandwich while the usual chorus of Snickers echoed from nearby tables. It was the same routine every day. Someone would call her name in roll call, a few kids would exchange glances, and the whispered jokes would begin. Who names their kid after a bird? They'd say. Does she think she's some kind of superhero or something? At 17, Falcon had grown tired of explaining that her grandmother had chosen the name, believing it would give her granddaughter strength and vision. Her abuela had fled Mexico with nothing but hope and determination, much like the fierce birds that soared across desert skies. But teenagers didn't care about family history or cultural significance. They cared about fitting in, and Falcon's name made her an easy target. The worst part wasn't even the teasing. It was how teachers would hesitate before calling on her, as if her name was some kind of tongue twister. How guidance counselors would suggest she might consider going by her middle name, Maria, when applying to colleges. How even well-meaning adults would ask if she'd ever thought about changing it when she turned 18. Each suggestion felt like a small betrayal, a gentle push toward erasing the part of herself that her grandmother had so carefully crafted. Falcon's family lived in Riverside, a working-class neighborhood where most parents worked double shifts just to keep their heads above water. Her mother, Carmen, cleaned office buildings downtown, leaving before sunrise and returning long after dinner. Her father, Miguel, worked construction during the day and drove for a rideshare company on weekends. Money was always tight, but they managed. What they couldn't manage was understanding why their daughter seemed so angry all the time. Mija, just ignore them, her mother would say whenever Falcon came home upset about another day of name-calling. Sticks and stones, remember? But Carmen didn't understand that words could cut deeper than stones. They could make you question everything about yourself, make you wonder if maybe everyone else was right, and you really were just too much. Falcon found solace in the one place where her name didn't matter, the local community center's computer lab. Mrs. Chun, the elderly volunteer who ran the program, never asked questions about why a teenage girl spent every afternoon hunched over an ancient desktop computer. She just handed Falcon a visitor's badge and pointed toward an empty station. It was there that Falcon discovered coding. At first, it was just curiosity. She'd always been good with numbers and logic puzzles, and programming seemed like the ultimate puzzle. Variables, functions, loops, they all made sense in a way that social hierarchies and popularity contests never did. In the world of code, there were rules that actually mattered. If you followed them correctly, things worked. If you didn't, the computer would tell you exactly what was wrong without any judgment or cruelty. She started with basic HTML, creating simple websites about topics that interested her. Then, she moved on to JavaScript, learning how to make interactive elements that responded to user input. The thrill of seeing her code come to life on screen was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. For the first time in her life, she felt powerful. Mrs. Chin noticed Falcon's dedication and began staying late to help her work through complex problems. "You have a natural talent for this," she told Falcon one evening as they debugged a particularly stubborn piece of code together. "Have you thought about pursuing computer science in college?" College. The word hung in the air like an impossible dream. Falcon's grades were decent, but not spectacular. Her family had never had money for college prep courses or tutoring. Most of her classmates who were college-bound had parents who'd gone to universities themselves, who understood the application process and could help navigate financial aid forms. Falcon's parents worked too hard just to survive to spend time researching colleges. But Mrs. Chun didn't let the subject drop. She printed out information about community colleges with strong computer science programs. She helped Falcon sign up for free online courses that would strengthen her programming skills. Most importantly, she introduced Falcon to Sarah Kim, a recent graduate from the local university who'd started her own tech company. Sarah was everything Falcon wished she could be. Confident, successful, and completely unbothered by what other people thought. When she learned about Falcon's situation, she didn't offer pity or platitudes. Instead, she offered something much more valuable, an opportunity. "I need someone to help with basic coding tasks," Sarah explained during their first meeting at the coffee shop near the community center. "It's not glamorous work, mostly data entry and simple website updates. But it pays $15 an hour, and you'll be learning real-world skills that you can't get in any classroom." $15 an hour was more money than Falcon had ever imagined having. Her parents made her get a work permit immediately, assuming she'd found some kind of retail job. When she explained that she'd be doing computer programming, they exchanged the same skeptical look they'd given each other when she'd first started spending all her time at the community center. "Just make sure you're not getting scammed," her father warned. "These computer things, sometimes people promise big money for nothing." Falcon understood their skepticism. In their world, real work involved physical labor and visible results. Programming seemed almost like magic, typing mysterious commands into a machine and somehow creating something valuable. But Sarah's business was legitimate, and the work was real. Falcon's first assignment was updating product descriptions on an e-commerce website for a local furniture store. It should have been simple, but the site's code was a mess of outdated HTML and broken links. What Sarah had estimated would take a few hours ended up taking Falcon the entire weekend. She worked late into the night, cross-referencing online tutorials and forums until she finally figured out how to make the changes without breaking the entire site. When she submitted the finished work, Sarah was impressed not just with the results, but with Falcon's persistence. Most people would have given up and asked for help, she said. "You stuck with it until you figured it out." That's exactly the kind of problem-solving mindset that makes a good programmer. The praise felt different from the empty encouragement Falcon usually received from teachers and family members. Sarah wasn't just being nice. She was recognizing something specific and valuable in Falcon's approach to challenges. For someone who'd spent years feeling like she was fundamentally flawed, it was a revelation to discover that her stubborn refusal to give up might actually be a strength. Word of Falcon's newfound job spread quickly through school, but not in the way she'd expected. Instead of being impressed, her classmates seemed even more convinced that she was weird. "She's getting paid to play on computers," she overheard Jessica Martinez telling a group of friends. "My little brother does that for free." The dismissive attitude stung, but it also fueled something fierce inside Falcon. She started taking on additional projects, working nights and weekends to build her skills and her reputation. Sarah introduced her to other small business owners who needed basic web development work. Soon, Falcon was earning more in a month than some of her classmates made working part-time at fast food restaurants. But success came with its own set of challenges. Her parents, while proud of her earnings, worried that she was spending too much time on computer stuff and not enough time on traditional teenage activities. They wanted her to go to dances and football games to make friends and date boys. They couldn't understand that Falcon had found something more satisfying than social acceptance. She'd found purpose. The tension at home reached a breaking point when Falcon announced that she wanted to use her savings to buy a better computer. Her parents saw it as a waste of money, an expensive toy that would distract her from more important things like getting good grades and preparing for a real career. "Computers are fine as a hobby," her mother said during a heated dinner conversation. "But you need to think about your future. What happens when this little business thing doesn't work out? You need something stable, something secure." Falcon tried to explain that technology wasn't going anywhere, that programming was one of the fastest growing career fields in the country. But her parents' concerns came from a place of love and fear. They'd seen too many young people chase dreams that led nowhere, and they wanted their daughter to choose the safe path. The disagreement created a rift that extended beyond the computer purchase. Falcon felt misunderstood and unsupported, while her parents felt like they were losing their daughter to a world they couldn't comprehend. The girl who'd once shared everything with her family now spent most of her time in her room, working on code and dreaming of a future that seemed increasingly distant from the life her parents had planned for her. At school, things weren't much better. Falcon's grades had started to slip as she devoted more time to her programming projects. Teachers who'd once seen potential in her now worried that she was getting distracted by unrealistic career goals. Her guidance counselor, Mr. Thompson, called her parents in for a conference. Falcon is a bright girl with a lot of potential, he explained to Carmen and Miguel. But I'm concerned that she's putting too much focus on these computer activities and not enough on her core academic subjects. She needs to maintain her GPA if she wants to have options after graduation. The irony wasn't lost on Falcon, who sat silently through the meeting. Here were adults discussing her future as if she wasn't in the room, making assumptions about what was best for her based on their own limited understanding of her interests and abilities. None of them had bothered to learn about the project she was working on or the skills she was developing. They just saw grades slipping and assumed she was making bad choices. That night, Falcon made a decision that would change everything. She was tired of fighting for validation from people who would never understand her path. Instead of trying to convince them, she would simply prove them wrong. She set up a separate savings account and began funneling every dollar she earned from programming work into it. She would buy the computer she needed, pursue the education she wanted, and build the career she dreamed of, with or without anyone else's approval. The plan required sacrifices. She stopped eating lunch at school to save money, packing simple sandwiches from home instead. She declined invitations to movies or shopping trips with the few classmates who occasionally included her. Every choice was calculated to move her closer to her goal, even if it meant becoming more isolated in the process. But isolation had an unexpected benefit. Without the constant noise of other people's opinions and expectations, Falcon could finally hear her own voice clearly. She discovered that she didn't just enjoy programming. She had a natural talent for seeing patterns and solving complex problems. She could look at a broken website or a glitchy application and immediately identify what was wrong and how to fix it. Sarah began giving her more challenging projects, including building a complete e-commerce platform for a local artist who wanted to sell her work online. The project required skills Falcon didn't have yet, so she spent weeks learning new programming languages and frameworks. She watched countless tutorial videos, read through documentation, and experimented with different approaches until she found solutions that worked. When the website launched successfully, generating the artist's first online sales within days, Falcon felt a pride unlike anything she'd experienced before. This wasn't just good grades on a test or praise from a teacher. This was real value created by her own skills and effort. She had built something that helped another person achieve their dreams. And she'd done it by being exactly who she was: stubborn, determined, and unafraid of difficult challenges. The success gave her confidence to reach even higher. She started researching universities with strong computer science programs, looking specifically for schools that offered merit-based scholarships for students with demonstrated programming skills. She began preparing for coding competitions and hackathons, events where her abilities would matter more than her name or her background. For the first time since childhood, when her grandmother had first told her stories about the fierce birds she was named after, Falcon felt ready to spread her wings and soar. Senior year brought new challenges that Falcon hadn't anticipated. While her classmates stressed about prom themes and graduation parties, she was navigating college applications and scholarship essays with little guidance from school counselors who seemed more focused on students with traditional academic achievements. Her unconventional path through high school, declining grades in some subjects while excelling in self-taught programming skills, didn't fit neatly into the boxes that college admission officers typically looked for. The first real test of her abilities came when Sarah recommended her for a regional coding competition at the state university. Falcon had never participated in anything like it before, and the registration fee alone represented 2 weeks of careful budgeting. But Sarah insisted it would be worth the investment, especially if Falcon could place well enough to catch the attention of university recruiters. The competition drew participants from prestigious private schools and well-funded public programs throughout the region. Falcon arrived at the university campus feeling underdressed and underprepared. The other participants seemed to know each other from previous competitions and coding camps that cost more than Falcon's family made in a month. They carried expensive laptops and wore t-shirts from technology companies, while Falcon had borrowed an old laptop from the community center and wore her best jeans and a plain sweater. During the practice session, conversations swirled around her about internships at major tech companies, advanced placement computer science courses, and summer programs at prestigious universities. Falcon kept quiet, focusing on the practice problems and try not to feel intimidated by everyone else's apparent head start in the world she was trying to enter. The competition itself lasted 6 hours, with participants working individually to solve increasingly complex programming challenges. Falcon approached each problem methodically, drawing on the troubleshooting skills she developed through months of real-world projects. While other participants seemed to rush through the early problems, she took her time to understand exactly what was being asked before writing any code. The strategy paid off in unexpected ways. Many of the flashier participants made careless mistakes in their hurry to finish quickly, while Falcon's careful approach helped her avoid errors that would have cost valuable points. Her experience debugging messy code for Sarah's clients had taught her to think through edge cases and potential problems before they occurred. When the results were announced that evening, Falcon placed 3rd overall, ahead of students from schools with computer science programs she'd only dreamed of attending. More importantly, her performance caught the attention of Dr. Patricia Valdez, a professor from the university's computer science department who was serving as one of the competition judges. Dr. Valdez sought out Falcon after the awards ceremony, asking about her background and training. When Falcon explained that she was entirely self-taught through online resources and real-world projects, the professor's interest intensified. "That's incredibly impressive," Dr. Valdez said. "Most of our incoming students have taken formal programming courses, but they often struggle with the kind of practical problem-solving you demonstrated today. Have you considered applying to our program?" Falcon had researched the university extensively, but the tuition costs had seemed impossibly high. Dr. Valdez explained that the computer science department offered several merit-based scholarships specifically designed for students who showed exceptional aptitude regardless of their formal educational background. "The application deadline has passed for the general scholarships," she continued, "but I'd like to recommend you for our Diversity in Tech initiative. It's designed to support students who bring unique perspectives and experiences to our program. Would you be interested in putting together an application?" The opportunity felt surreal. Just hours earlier, Falcon had been worried about whether she belonged in the same room as the other competitors. Now a professor from a respected university was actively encouraging her to apply for a scholarship program. But excitement quickly gave way to anxiety as she considered what the application process would require. The scholarship application demanded essays, recommendation letters, and a portfolio of programming projects that demonstrated both technical skills and real-world impact. Falcon had the projects, her work for Sarah, and other clients had given her a solid foundation of practical experience. But she'd never written the kind of formal essays that college applications required, and she wasn't sure who could provide the academic recommendations that would carry weight with an admissions committee. Mrs. Chun immediately agreed to write a recommendation letter, praising Falcon's dedication and self-directed learning over the months they'd worked together at the community center. Sarah offered to provide a professional reference highlighting Falcon's client work and problem-solving abilities. But Falcon still needed at least one academic reference from a teacher who could speak to her potential for university-level coursework. Her math teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, had always appreciated Falcon's logical thinking and attention to detail, even though she'd never been particularly engaged in traditional algebra and geometry classes. When she explained her situation and asked if he'd be willing to write a recommendation, he surprised her with his enthusiasm. "I've always wondered why someone with your analytical mind seemed so uninterested in mathematics," he said. "Now, I understand. You were applying those skills in ways that were more meaningful to you. I'd be honored to write a recommendation that highlights your ability to think through complex problems systematically." The essay portion of the application proved more challenging than any coding problem Falcon had ever encountered. She'd never been particularly strong in English classes, preferring the precision of mathematics and logic to the ambiguity of literary analysis. Writing about her personal journey and career goals required a different kind of vulnerability than she was comfortable with. She started and abandoned dozens of drafts, struggling to find a voice that felt authentic without sounding either too humble or too boastful. How could she explain the significance of her grandmother's influence without making it sound like a cliché? How could she describe her passion for programming without seeming obsessed or one-dimensional? Sarah offered to review her drafts, providing feedback that helped Falcon understand the difference between technical writing and persuasive essay composition. "You need to tell a story," Sarah explained after reading through one particularly dry attempt. "Technical specs are important, but people connect with narratives. What's the story of how you became someone who solves problems with code?" The breakthrough came when Falcon stopped trying to sound like what she thought a college applicant should sound like and started writing in her own voice. She described the frustration of being dismissed because of her name, the discovery of programming as a language that valued logic over popularity, and the gradual realization that her outsider perspective might actually be an advantage in a field that desperately needed diverse thinking. She wrote about debugging code at 2 in the morning, driven by the stubborn determination that her parents saw as a character flaw, but that she'd learned to recognize as her greatest strength. She described the satisfaction of creating something useful from nothing but ideas and keystrokes, and the dream of using technology to solve problems for people who'd been overlooked by others. The finished essay was unlike anything she'd ever written for school. It was personal and passionate, technical and emotional. When she read it aloud to herself, she could hear her own voice clearly for the first time in years. Submitting the application felt like jumping off a cliff. Everything she'd worked for over the past 2 years was distilled into a few documents that would be reviewed by strangers who would decide whether her unconventional path was worth supporting. The waiting period stretched ahead like an eternity. While the scholarship application was under review, life continued with its usual complications. Falcon's relationship with her parents remained strained, particularly as they watched her spend more time on what they still saw as a risky distraction from traditional academic success. Her grades in non-programming subjects continued to suffer as she devoted most of her energy to client projects and skill development. The tension reached a crisis point when Falcon received a failing grade on a major English literature essay. Her parents were called in for another meeting with a guidance counselor, where they learned that their daughter was at risk of not graduating on time if her grades didn't improve significantly. "I don't understand what's happened to her," Carmen said tearfully after the meeting. "She used to be such a good student. Now all she cares about are those computers." Miguel was more direct. "This has gone too far," he told Falcon that evening. "You're going to stop this programming nonsense and focus on school, or you're going to find somewhere else to live." The ultimatum forced Falcon to confront the reality that her pursuit of her dreams was creating real consequences for her family relationships. But backing down now felt like betraying not just herself, but also her grandmother's memory and the faith that people like Mrs. Chun and Sarah had placed in her abilities. She made a desperate bargain with her parents. She would buckle down and bring up her grades in time to graduate, but in exchange, they had to let her continue with her programming work and college applications. It meant 18-hour days of school, tutoring sessions, and client work, but Falcon was determined to prove that she could succeed on multiple fronts simultaneously. The next few months tested every limit of Falcon's endurance and determination. She hired a classmate to tutor her in English literature, trading web development work for help with essay analysis and writing techniques. She negotiated extensions on client projects so she could focus on bringing up her grades without completely abandoning her income stream. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford. Most nights, she fell asleep over textbooks or code, waking up with keyboard impressions on her cheek and assignments scattered around her desk. Her parents watched her struggle with a mixture of pride and concern, finally beginning to understand the depth of her commitment to her chosen path. The scholarship notification arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered in a thin envelope that made Falcon's heart sink. Thin envelopes usually meant rejection letters, but when she opened it with trembling hands, the letter inside was brief but life-changing. "Congratulations," it began. "The computer science department is pleased to offer you a full scholarship through our Diversity in Technology initiative, contingent upon your graduation from high school and enrollment in our program." Full scholarship. The words seemed impossible, even as Falcon read them over and over again. Tuition, room and board, even a stipend for books and living expenses. Everything she dreamed of but hadn't dared to hope for was suddenly within reach. The celebration at home was bittersweet. Carmen and Miguel were proud of their daughter's achievement, but they also struggled with the reality that it would take her far from home and into a world they didn't understand. The university was only 2 hours away by car, but it might as well have been on another planet for how different it would be from everything Falcon had known. News of the scholarship spread quickly through school, generating reactions that ranged from genuine congratulation to bitter resentment. Some classmates who had spent years dismissing Falcon's interests suddenly wanted to know how she'd managed to earn a full ride to a prestigious university. Others seemed to take her success as a personal affront, as if her achievement somehow diminished their own prospects. Jessica Martinez, who had been particularly cruel about Falcon's name and interests over the years, cornered her in the hallway after the news became public. "I guess having a weird name really does pay off," she said with forced casualness. "Lucky you, getting rewarded for being different." The comment was meant to sting, to suggest that Falcon's success was somehow unearned or based on tokenism rather than merit. A year earlier, it might have worked, but Falcon had learned too much about herself and her abilities to be shaken by jealousy disguised as casual cruelty. "Yeah," she replied calmly. "I guess it does pay to be yourself, instead of trying to be like everyone else." The exchange crystallized something important for Falcon. The same qualities that had made her a target for mockery, her unusual name, her stubborn independence, her refusal to conform to others' expectations, had ultimately become the foundation of her success. The bird of prey her grandmother had named her for was finally ready to soar. Graduation day arrived with a mixture of ceremony and chaos that felt appropriate for the end of Falcon's high school journey. She walked across the stage in a cap and gown that her parents had saved for months to buy, clutching a diploma that represented not just academic achievement, but the culmination of years of fighting to define herself on her own terms. In the audience, Carmen and Miguel wiped away proud tears as they watched their daughter receive recognition for academic excellence in computer science, a subject that hadn't even existed in their own high school experience. Mrs. Chun beamed from the family section, having been invited as an honorary family member in recognition of her role in Falcon's journey. Sarah recorded the moment on her phone, already planning to use Falcon's story as inspiration for other young women who might doubt their place in the technology industry. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came after the ceremony, when Dr. Valdez approached the Rodriguez family to introduce herself and express her excitement about having Falcon join the university program in the fall. "Your daughter has exceptional talent," she told Carmen and Miguel through a mixture of English and Spanish. "But more than that, She has the kind of determination and unique perspective that will make her a leader in whatever field she chooses to pursue. You should be very proud. For parents who had spent years worrying that their daughter's unconventional interests were leading her down a dangerous path, Dr. Valdez's words provided the validation they hadn't known they needed. Their daughter wasn't just different. She was gifted in ways that would open doors they'd never imagined possible. As the family celebrated that evening with a dinner at Falcon's favorite Mexican restaurant, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that first day she'd wandered into the community center's computer lab. The girl who had once eaten lunch alone rather than endure another day of name-calling was now heading to university on a full scholarship, with job offers already materializing from the network of professionals she'd built through her client work. But success hadn't erased the memories of feeling like an outsider, and Falcon was determined to use her platform to help other young people who might be struggling with similar challenges. She'd already started volunteering at the community center, teaching basic programming skills to younger students who showed interest but lacked access to formal computer science education. The summer between high school graduation and college was filled with preparation, both practical and emotional. Falcon worked extra hours for Sarah's company to save money for expenses that her scholarship wouldn't cover. She researched her university courses and professors, reaching out to connect with other incoming freshmen who shared her interests. She also spent precious time with her family, knowing that their relationship would change once she left for college. The conversations with her parents grew deeper and more honest as the departure date approached. Carmen admitted that she'd been scared of losing her daughter to a world she didn't understand, while Miguel confessed that his opposition to Falcon's programming interests had been rooted in his own feelings of inadequacy around technology. "I didn't want you to get hurt," he explained during one late-night conversation. "I've seen too many young people chase dreams that didn't work out. But I was wrong to try to hold you back. You've already achieved more than I thought was possible." The acknowledgement meant everything to Falcon, who had spent years feeling like she had to choose between her family's approval and her own ambitions. Knowing that her parents finally understood and supported her path gave her the confidence to embrace the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. As August approached and college preparation intensified, Falcon found herself thinking often about her grandmother and the stories she'd shared about the fierce birds that soared across desert skies. The woman who had chosen her name with such care and intention would have been proud to see how her granddaughter had learned to use her wings. College life hit Falcon like a wave of contradictions. The university campus was everything she'd dreamed of: state-of-the-art computer labs, professors who were leading experts in their fields, and classmates who shared her passion for technology. But it was also overwhelming in ways she hadn't anticipated. The social dynamics that she'd hoped to leave behind in high school seemed to exist here too, just with different markers of status and belonging. Her dorm room was small, but functional, shared with a roommate named Ashley who came from a wealthy suburb outside the state capital. Ashley's side of the room was decorated with expensive electronics and designer clothes, while Falcon's belongings fit into 2 modest suitcases and a few boxes. The contrast wasn't lost on either of them, though they both tried to be polite about it. The computer science program was rigorous from day one. Professor Williams, who taught the introductory programming course, made it clear that many students would struggle with the transition from high school to university-level work. "Look around this room," he said during the first lecture. "Statistically, half of you will change majors before the end of your sophomore year. Computer science isn't for everyone, and that's okay." Falcon felt a familiar surge of determination at the challenge. She'd heard similar warnings before, from teachers who doubted her commitment, from family members who questioned her choices, from classmates who dismissed her abilities. Each time, she'd proven them wrong through persistence and hard work. But university coursework was different from the self-directed learning and client projects that had brought her this far. The theoretical foundations that her classmates had learned in advanced placement courses were gaps she had to fill quickly while keeping up with new material. Concepts like algorithm analysis and data structures made sense to her intuitively, but she lacked the formal mathematical background that many of her peers took for granted. The first major programming assignment was a revelation. Students were asked to create a simple inventory management system using object-oriented programming principles. While many of her classmates struggled with translating theoretical concepts into working code, Falcon approached the problem from a practical perspective. She'd built similar systems for Sarah's clients, so she understood not just how to make the code work, but how to make it maintainable and user-friendly. Her solution was elegant and efficient, earning praise from Professor Williams and curious looks from classmates who were beginning to realize that the quiet girl from the small town might be more talented than they'd assumed. But success in coursework was only part of the college experience, and Falcon found herself struggling with aspects of university life that had nothing to do with programming. The social hierarchies of college were more subtle, but no less exclusionary than those she'd faced in high school. Students formed study groups and friendships based on shared backgrounds and experiences that Falcon didn't share. Conversations about spring break trips to expensive resorts, unpaid internships that required family financial support, and social events that assumed unlimited spending money reminded her constantly of how different her reality was from that of many classmates. Her scholarship covered tuition and basic expenses, but it didn't bridge the social and cultural gaps that separated her from peers who came from professional families with generations of college experience. She learned to navigate these differences quietly, focusing on her studies and avoiding situations that highlighted her outsider status. The isolation might have been overwhelming if not for Dr. Valdez, who made it a point to check on Falcon's progress regularly. During office hours that stretched into informal mentoring sessions, she helped Falcon understand that imposter syndrome was common among first-generation college students, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds in technical fields. I felt the same way when I started my graduate program, Dr. Valdez shared during one of these conversations. I was the first person in my family to go to college, let alone pursue a PhD in computer science. I spent my first year convinced that everyone else belonged there more than I did. The confession was reassuring, but it also highlighted the ongoing nature of the challenges Falcon would face. Success in college was just the beginning of a career in an industry where people like her were still underrepresented at every level. Dr. Valdez introduced Falcon to other faculty members who were working on research projects that aligned with her interests. Dr. Jennifer Park was developing artificial intelligence applications for small business management, work that reminded Falcon of her own experiences helping entrepreneurs optimize their operations through technology. Would you be interested in working as an undergraduate research assistant? Dr. Park asked after reviewing samples of Falcon's coursework. The pay isn't much, but you'd gain experience with cutting-edge AI techniques and have opportunities to present your work at conferences. The research position was exactly the kind of opportunity that Falcon had hoped college would provide. Working directly with faculty members on projects that could make a real difference felt like a natural extension of her client work, but with access to resources and expertise that she could never have accessed on her own. The AI research consumed Falcon's free time, but in the best possible way. She spent evenings in the lab running experiments and analyzing data, surrounded by graduate students who treated her as an equal contributor rather than just an undergraduate assistant. The work was challenging and often frustrating, but it connected directly to her long-term goals in ways that traditional coursework sometimes didn't. Her first research paper, co-authored with Dr. Park and a graduate student named Marcus Chun, was accepted for presentation at a regional conference on artificial intelligence applications. Standing at a poster session, explaining their methodology to industry professionals and academics, Falcon felt a confidence that had been building throughout her college experience finally solidify into certainty about her chosen path. The conference was also where she met Janet Morrison, a senior software engineer at a major technology company who was recruiting for their diversity and inclusion internship program. After hearing Falcon's presentation and learning about her background, Janet encouraged her to apply, for a summer internship position. We're specifically looking for students who bring different perspectives to our team, Janet explained. Your combination of practical experience and research background is exactly what we need for some of the projects we're working on. The internship application process was intimidating, requiring technical interviews and coding challenges that tested skills Falcon had never formally studied. But her years of self-directed learning and problem-solving under pressure served her well. When the technical interviewer presented her with a complex algorithm problem, she approached it methodically, thinking out loud as she worked through potential solutions. "I haven't seen this exact problem before," she admitted to the interviewer, "but it reminds me of some optimization challenges I worked on for small business clients. Let me try adapting that approach." Her willingness to acknowledge uncertainty while demonstrating problem-solving skills impressed the interview panel. 2 weeks later, she received an offer for a summer internship position that would pay more than she'd ever earned and provide experience at one of the most respected technology companies in the industry. The news spread quickly through the computer science department, where landing internships at major tech companies was considered a significant achievement for any student, let alone a sophomore. Classmates who had previously overlooked Falcon began seeking her advice about interview preparation and technical skill development. Some of the attention felt genuine, but Falcon was also aware that her success was making some people uncomfortable in ways that echoed her high school experience. Comments about diversity hires and lucky breaks followed her through hallways and study sessions, reminders that some people would always question whether her achievements were truly earned. The criticism stung, but it also motivated Falcon to work even harder. She knew that she would face additional scrutiny throughout her career, that her successes would be attributed to luck or social programs rather than merit. The only way to combat those assumptions was through undeniable excellence in everything she attempted. Spring semester brought new challenges as Falcon balanced advanced coursework with preparations for her summer internship. She was taking upper-level courses typically reserved for juniors and seniors, having tested out of several introductory classes based on her practical experience. The accelerated pace was demanding, but it also positioned her to complete her degree ahead of schedule if she chose to. The internship began in June with an orientation that brought together college students from universities across the country. Falcon was struck by the diversity of backgrounds and experiences represented in the cohort, but also by how many of her fellow interns came from prestigious universities and had access to opportunities that she'd never known existed. Her assigned project involved developing machine learning algorithms to improve customer service response times, work that drew directly on both her research experience and her understanding of small business operations. The technical skills required were advanced, but Falcon's mentor, a senior engineer named David Kim, was patient and encouraging as she learned to navigate the company's development environment and coding standards. "You ask different questions than most interns," David observed after Falcon had spent a week analyzing the problem from multiple angles. "Most people focus on the technical implementation first. You're thinking about how real users will interact with the system." The observation highlighted something that Falcon had begun to recognize as her unique strength. Her background working directly with small business owners had taught her to consider the human impact of technical solutions in ways that classmates with purely academic experience often missed. Her project presentation at the end of the internship demonstrated algorithms that not only improved response times, but also enhanced customer satisfaction in ways that hadn't been anticipated. The result impressed not just her immediate team, but senior leadership who attended the intern presentations. "Have you given any thought to what you want to do after graduation?" asked Sarah Chun, a vice president who had stopped by Falcon's presentation. "We'd love to discuss full-time opportunities when you're ready." The offer was flattering and financially attractive, but Falcon found herself thinking about Dr. Valdez's advice about considering graduate school. A master's degree would open doors to research positions and advanced roles that might not be available with just a bachelor's degree, but it would also mean turning down immediate financial security. The decision became more complex when she learned that several graduate programs were interested in recruiting her based on her research publications and internship performance. The applications would be due in the fall, requiring her to choose between immediate employment and continued education during her junior year. She discussed the dilemma with her parents during a weekend visit home. Carmen and Miguel had watched their daughter's transformation with pride and amazement, but they still struggled to understand the career landscape she was navigating. Graduate school sounds expensive, Miguel said practically. If you already have a job offer, maybe it makes sense to start working and see if you can take classes part-time. His perspective was rooted in the practical concerns that had shaped their family's approach to financial decisions for years. But Falcon had learned to think in longer time horizons, considering not just immediate financial gain, but strategic career development. Dr. Valdez provided a different perspective when Falcon sought her advice. You're young enough that you can afford to make the strategic investment in advanced education, she said. The opportunities available to someone with a master's degree from a top program are significantly different from those available with just a bachelor's degree, even from our excellent program. The conversation helped Falcon realize that her decision wasn't just about her own career trajectory, but about the impact she wanted to have on others who might follow similar paths. Advanced education would give her credibility and platform to advocate for other underrepresented students in technology fields. She decided to apply to graduate programs while keeping her job options open, figuring that having multiple choices was better than limiting herself prematurely. The application process was familiar but still stressful, requiring research statements and academic references that position her as a potential scholar rather than just a skilled practitioner. Her research statement focused on developing AI applications specifically designed for small businesses and underserved communities, drawing on her experiences with Sarah's clients and the challenges she'd observe in trying to make technology accessible to people who lack technical backgrounds. I want to bridge the gap between advanced computational techniques and practical applications that can make a real difference in people's lives, she wrote. Too often, innovation in computer science is focused on problems that primarily benefit people who already have access to significant resources. I'm interested in developing solutions that democratize technology in ways that create opportunity for everyone. The statement reflected not just Falcon's technical interests, but the values that had driven her throughout her unconventional journey from community center computer lab to university research lab. She wasn't just pursuing advanced education for personal benefit, but as a platform for creating the kind of change she wished had been available when she was starting out. Acceptance letters began arriving in March, each one representing validation of choices that had seemed risky just a few years earlier. Stanford, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, programs that she'd only dreamed of attending were offering her positions with full funding and research assistantships. The final decision came down to fit rather than prestige. Dr. Elena Rodriguez at UC Berkeley was developing exactly the kind of socially conscious AI applications that aligned with Falcon's interests, and the program's location would allow her to maintain connections with the small business community in California while accessing the resources of a world-class research institution. Graduation day felt different from high school commencement 3 years earlier. This time, Falcon walked across the stage with confidence earned through academic achievement, research success, and industry recognition. Her parents sat in the audience with tears of pride, finally understanding that their daughter's unconventional path had led to opportunities beyond anything they'd imagined possible. Dr. Valdez spoke at the computer science department ceremony, highlighting several students whose achievements represented the future of the field. When she mentioned Falcon's combination of technical excellence and commitment to social impact, the applause was genuine and sustained. Students like Falcon remind us why diversity matters in technology, Dr. Valdez said. She brings perspectives and experiences that make her not just a skilled programmer, but a thoughtful innovator who understands how technology can serve communities that have been overlooked by traditional approaches to computer science. The summer before graduate school provided time for Falcon to reflect on her journey and prepare for the next phase of her education. She spent part of the break working again with Sarah, now as a consultant rather than an entry-level assistant, helping to develop strategic technology plans for the growing network of small businesses they supported. The work reminded her of why she'd fallen in love with programming in the first place. The satisfaction of solving real problems for people who needed help. But now she had the skills and knowledge to tackle challenges that had seemed impossible when she was 17 and teaching herself HTML in the community center. She also spent time volunteering with high school students who were interested in technology careers, but lacked access to formal computer science education. Working with teenagers who reminded her of her younger self, Falcon realized how much her perspective had changed while the core values that drove her remained constant. "Don't let anyone convince you that you don't belong," she told a group of students during a workshop at the community center where her own journey had begun. The same qualities that make you different might be exactly what the field needs. Your job is to develop the skills to prove it. The advice reflected lessons learned through years of fighting to define herself on her own terms, refusing to let others' limited expectations constrain her aspirations. The girl who had once eaten lunch alone rather than face mockery about her name was now preparing to enter one of the most prestigious graduate programs in the country, with job offers from major technology companies and research opportunities that could shape the future of artificial intelligence. Standing in the same computer lab where Mrs. Chun had first encouraged her interest in programming, Falcon could see clearly how each challenge had prepared her for the next phase of her journey. The mockery about her name had taught her to value authentic self-expression over social acceptance. The skepticism about her unconventional path had forced her to develop unshakable confidence in her own abilities. The financial constraints that had shaped her family's reality had motivated her to work harder and think more strategically than peers who took resources for granted. As she prepared to start graduate school, Falcon knew that new challenges awaited. Graduate education would be demanding in ways that undergraduate coursework hadn't prepared her for. The research she wanted to pursue would require navigating academic politics and funding competitions that favored established networks and traditional approaches. But she also knew that she was ready. The fierce spirit that her grandmother had seen and named was fully developed now, tempered by years of challenges that had taught her to soar even when others doubted she could fly. The girl they had laughed at for having a bird's name was about to prove that sometimes the most unlikely person carries exactly the strength the world needs. The future stretched ahead, full of possibilities that would have seemed impossible to the teenager who had first discovered programming as an escape from social rejection. Dr. Falcon Rodriguez was ready to show the world what happened when you gave someone with the heart of a predator the tools to hunt for solutions to humanity's biggest problems.